A single coin, 1 ounce of silver, sold for $46,125. Not gold, not platinum, silver. At a moment when most investors weren't even watching, something shifted quietly in the numismatic market. A signal, hidden in plain sight, that the old rules of value may no longer apply. Because this wasn't about melt value. This was about scarcity, memory, and a market waking up to something it had ignored for decades. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this happened, and why it may be the first sign of something much bigger coming for silver. Stay with us, because what happens next could change how you think about wealth entirely. Welcome back to Precious Metals Intelligence, the channel where strategic economic developments are examined with the depth and discipline they deserve. If you are joining for the first time, know that this channel exists for one purpose: to help serious, wealth-conscious viewers understand the forces quietly reshaping the value of money, metal, and time. Before we continue, it would mean a great deal to know who's watching, so please, if you have a moment, where are you watching from today? Share your city or country below. This channel has grown into a global community of thoughtful investors, and it is always worth knowing just how far these conversations reach. On a quiet day in the world of coin collecting, something happened that most people never saw coming. A single 1-ounce silver coin sold for $46,125. Not a rare gold coin, not a platinum bar. A coin made of silver, worth only a few dollars in raw metal value, sold for a price that stunned even seasoned collectors. The coin was a 1998 Mexican Silver Libertad. It had been graded MS-70, which means it was judged to be in flawless condition without a single visible flaw. 23 different bidders competed for this one coin. Each of them pushed the price higher and higher until it reached a number that made headlines across the precious metals world. To understand why this matters, it helps to step back and ask a simple question. Why would anyone pay more than 1,500 times the value of the silver inside a coin just to own that coin? This is the question every serious investor should be asking right now. Most people think of silver in a simple way. They believe its value comes from its weight and its purity. If silver trades at a certain price per ounce, then a 1-ounce coin should be worth close to that price, plus a small amount for minting and dealer costs. That is how bullion is supposed to work. But this auction broke that rule completely. What happened here was not about the metal at all. It was about scarcity. It was about a coin that very few people saved when it was minted decades ago. Nobody knew, back in 1998, that this particular coin would become so hard to find. Nobody was storing boxes of them, expecting future demand. And now, almost 30 years later, collectors are discovering just how few of these coins survived in top condition. This is the first thread investors need to pay attention to. And when a hidden scarcity finally gets discovered by the market, prices do not rise slowly. They jump. And they jump fast, often without warning, catching people off guard who were not paying close attention. This is not the only sign of unusual demand. Auction records show that similar coins from the same series have been rising in value year after year, and the pace of that increase has been picking up speed recently. What was once a slow, steady climb has turned into something much sharper. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern forming in real time. For business professionals and serious investors, this story is not just an interesting piece of collector trivia. It is a signal. It shows how quickly value can shift when scarcity meets renewed demand, especially during times when people are losing confidence in paper currency and looking for something more solid to hold on to. Silver has always played two roles in the economy. It is an industrial metal used in electronics, solar panels, and manufacturing. But it is also a store of value, something people turn to when they worry about inflation, currency debasement, or economic uncertainty. This auction result suggests that a third layer of value is now emerging. Certified scarcity, backed by grading and verified history, is becoming its own separate market, one that can move independently of the regular price of silver. This raises an important question. If a hidden pocket of scarcity in a relatively obscure coin series can trigger this kind of bidding war, what does that say about the broader precious metals market? Are there other coins, other series, quietly building the same kind of pressure, waiting to be noticed? That question will not be answered easily. But it is worth taking seriously, especially now, as more collectors and investors begin paying attention to certified rarity rather than simple bullion weight. Behind every coin that sells for a fortune, there is a story most people never bother to learn. To understand why the 1998 Mexican Silver Libertad became so valuable, it helps to look at where this coin came from and why it was different from other silver coins right from the start. The Libertad series began in 1982, when the Mexican mint, known as Casa de Moneda de Mexico, started producing silver coins as a way to give investors and collectors a way to own pure silver backed by the government of Mexico. This was similar in idea to what other countries were doing with their own bullion programs, but the Libertad took its own path, one that would later make certain years extremely hard to find. Mexico is one of the largest silver-producing countries in the world. Yet, surprisingly, that did not mean large numbers of Libertad coins were made every year. Much of Mexico's silver went toward industrial use, not coin production. Because of this, the mint often produced smaller batches of Libertads compared to other well-known silver coins, such as the American Silver Eagle. Fewer coins made each year meant that some years became naturally rare, simply because so few were struck in the first place. The 1990s were an especially interesting period for this series. During those years, mintage numbers for several dates dropped even lower than usual. The 1998 issue, the same year connected to this record sale, is considered one of the scarcest dates in the entire modern series. At the time, nobody treated it as anything special. It was simply another year of bullion production, sold at a modest price with little thought given to future rarity. This is where an important lesson begins to take shape. Scarcity is not something that is always obvious at the moment it happens. Often, it becomes visible only years later, once collectors look back and realize how few examples were actually saved. Nobody in 1998 was storing large quantities of this coin, expecting it to become valuable one day. Dealers sold it as ordinary bullion. Investors bought it simply for its silver content. Almost no one held on to it with long-term rarity in mind. Compare this to the American Silver Eagle, a coin many investors already know well. Over the decades, large numbers of eagles were minted every year, and many were stored away in bulk by dealers and stackers, often in what collectors call monster boxes. Because so many were saved in large quantities, most dates remain relatively easy to find today, even decades later. The Libertad took a very different road. Nobody protected these coins the same way. Supplies of early dates became thin, not because people believed they would be rare, but simply because so few people were paying attention. This difference matters greatly for anyone trying to understand today's auction results. When a coin from a well-known and heavily saved series becomes scarce, it typically happens slowly over a long stretch of time. But when a coin from a less protected series becomes scarce, the shift can be sudden and dramatic once the market finally notices. That is precisely what appears to be happening with the Libertad series right now. Collectors who have spent years building complete date sets of silver eagles are increasingly turning their attention toward the Libertad series, searching for the same kind of completeness. As that shift takes place, the coins that were quietly scarce for decades are suddenly facing intense demand from buyers who understand exactly how limited the surviving supply really is. This is the heart of Part 2's lesson. Scarcity that goes unnoticed for years does not disappear. It waits. And when serious money finally recognizes it, the response is not gradual. It becomes fast, competitive, and sometimes explosive, exactly as it was witnessed with the astonishing bidding war over the 1998 Libertad. Understanding this pattern gives investors a valuable tool. It teaches them to look beyond the surface of a market, beyond the simple price of raw metal, and to ask a deeper question: which assets today are quietly building the same kind of hidden scarcity, waiting years from now to surprise everyone all over again? Most people assume that a coin is worth roughly the same no matter what condition it is in, as long as it is genuine. This auction result proves that assumption wrong in a powerful way. Condition, when verified by a trusted third party, can turn an ordinary coin into an extraordinary asset. This is the second major force behind the record-breaking sale of the 1998 Libertad, and it deserves close attention. The coin that sold for $46,000 was not just any 1998 Libertad. It carried a grade of MS-70 from a respected grading service. This grade represents the highest possible mark a coin can receive. It means the coin shows no visible imperfections at all, not a single scratch, mark, or flaw, even under close inspection. Reaching this level of perfection, especially for a coin struck decades ago, is extremely difficult. To understand why this matters so much, it helps to compare sale prices across different grades of the very same coin. An example, graded one step lower, at MS-69, sold for just over $1,000 back in 2023. That may already sound like a strong price for a bullion coin. But only 3 years later, a coin of that same MS-69 grade sold for more than $5,000, nearly 5 times higher. That alone shows a market moving quickly, yet the jump to a perfect MS-70 grade pushed the price even further, into territory that most people would never expect for a single ounce of silver. This pattern reveals something important about how modern markets value scarcity. It is no longer enough for a coin to simply be old or rare in a general sense. Buyers today want proof. They want independent verification that a coin is exactly what it claims to be, and that its condition meets the highest possible standard. Grading services provide that proof, and in doing so, they have transformed coin collecting into something closer to a financial market, complete with standardized ratings that buyers can trust. This shift did not happen overnight. Over the past several years, more collectors have become comfortable relying on third-party grading before making a purchase. As trust in these grading systems grew, so did the willingness of buyers to pay dramatically higher prices for top-graded coins. The result is a widening gap between an average example and a perfect one, a gap that keeps growing larger with each passing year. There's a deeper economic story hiding inside this trend as well. When people lose confidence in paper currency or worry about inflation eating away at their savings, they often look for ways to protect their wealth using physical assets. Silver and gold have played this role for centuries, but in recent years, something new has emerged alongside traditional bullion buying. Certified, high-grade coins are increasingly being treated as their own separate category of asset, valued not just for their metal content, but for their proven rarity and flawless condition. This means that numismatic premiums, the extra amount buyers pay above the raw value of the metal, are no longer just a side note for hobbyists. They are becoming an early signal of where serious money is flowing. When collectors and investors are willing to pay thousands of dollars above spot price for a single coin, it often reflects a broader search for scarce, trustworthy stores of value, especially during uncertain economic periods. This record auction result, then, is not simply a story about one lucky coin or one determined bidder. It is a window into a larger shift taking place across the precious metals world. Buyers are paying closer attention to verified quality and true rarity, rather than settling for ordinary bullion at ordinary prices. As this trend continues, the gap between average coins and perfect, certified coins is likely to keep widening, rewarding those who understood the pattern early. This brings the discussion to an important turning point. If grading and scarcity together can create this kind of dramatic price movement in a single coin, what does that suggest about the wider economic forces driving people toward hard assets in the first place? That question sets the stage for a much bigger picture, one that reaches far beyond a single auction and into the heart of today's global economy. A single coin auction, on its own, might seem like a small event, but when placed against the backdrop of the wider economy, it starts to look like something much more significant. The timing of this record sale is not an accident. It fits into a much larger pattern taking shape across financial markets in recent years. Since 2025, uncertainty around trade policy and tariffs has weighed heavily on markets around the world. Businesses have struggled to plan ahead when rules keep shifting. Investors have grown wary of holding assets whose value depends heavily on government decisions that can change with little warning. In times like these, people naturally begin looking for something more stable, something whose value does not depend on a single country's policy choices. This is exactly the environment in which precious metals tend to shine. Silver and gold have served as stores of value for thousands of years, precisely because they do not rely on any government's promise to hold their worth. When confidence in currency weakens, even slightly, capital tends to flow toward physical assets that carry a long history of preserving wealth. At the same time, inflation concerns have remained persistent. Even when official numbers suggest inflation is under control, many everyday investors continue to feel the pressure of rising costs in their daily lives. This gap between official data and lived experience often pushes people to look beyond savings accounts and paper investments, toward assets they can physically hold and trust. This is where the connection to the Libertad auction becomes clear. As more investors search for reliable stores of value, they are not only buying ordinary bullion. They are increasingly drawn toward certified, provably scarce coins, because these coins offer something ordinary bullion cannot. They combine the physical security of silver with a verified limited supply that cannot be replicated or increased. The same pattern is beginning to appear in the Gold Libertad series as well. Collectors who have completed their Silver Libertad sets are now turning their attention to gold versions of the same coins, particularly smaller low-mintage issues from the 1990s and early 2000s. Auction specialists have noted growing competition for these scarce gold fractionals, suggesting that the demand seen in silver may soon extend further into the gold market. There is also a broader signal worth noting. A major upcoming auction is set to include a complete collection of classic Mexican gold coins known as centenarios, spanning issues from the early 20th century. These coins, each containing more than 1 ounce of gold, represent a different category of Mexican numismatic history. How this collection performs at auction may offer further evidence of whether the current wave of demand is limited to modern coins, or whether it reflects a much wider shift toward Mexican precious metals as a whole. For business professionals and serious investors watching from the outside, this pattern carries an important lesson. Markets rarely move in isolation. A record price for one coin is worth noting on its own. But when that record fits into a larger pattern of rising demand, growing grading premiums, and mounting economic uncertainty, it becomes something far more important. It becomes a signal. The question now is not whether this single auction was unusual. It clearly was. The real question is whether this event marks the early stage of a much larger shift in how investors think about scarce, certified precious metals, at a moment when confidence in traditional paper assets continues to be tested.